Hi everyone, welcome to Out of the Box Room, where I'm joined by travel industry professionals to talk and to share experiences, both personal and professional, straight out of my box room turned into an office. Please don't forget to like, to share, and most important, to come back for more. Today I'm joined by a phenomenal guest, Ken McLeod, consultant to the travel industry. I hope you enjoy it. Good morning, Ken. Welcome to the box room, and thank you very much for your time and to share your experience. So, of course, we know each other for a long time, but would you please give a short introduction of there's no need, I'm sure, but just give an introduction for my viewers.
Well, okay, I'm Ken McLeod. I've been in the travel industry for too many years, I guess. I'm basically retired now. I left the industry, well, you'll find out when I left the industry, but I worked in the corporate side of the business for a great number of years, and also in the leisure side, mainly for Advantage Travels partnership latterly, and did some consultancy after that as well. So, but have had a varied career and enjoyed almost every minute of it.
Thank you. One of the things that intrigued me, and the reason why I wanted you here, because of course I see your social media, and I know that last year when all this was unfolding, and in Europe we were all, you know, we didn't know what was going on and happened. You were not in Scotland. Do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, well, we decided that we would take a long holiday, a 4-week holiday to South America, basically to Rio and Iguazu Falls, and the usual trip down to Buenos Aires, and then Patagonia. Which I tell you, Patagonia is the most wonderful place on earth. It's absolutely stunning. I urge anybody who has the opportunity of going there to take a trip down to that region. It's fantastic. But we flew back to Buenos Aires to pick up a cruise, 14-day cruise round the Horn, and it set off wonderfully well. And as we had just left the UK, there was a few issues with the COVID-19 problem in Italy, and your home country, and it wasn't great, but it didn't worry us that much, and it didn't seem to worry anybody elsewhere in Europe too much. And obviously, while we were in South America, the news started to filter through, not so much when we were touring around South America, but once we were on the cruise, we had access to TV and obviously world news on BBC, Sky, and so forth. So as we headed towards the end of our cruise, we were heading towards Santiago for docking, and I think 6 hours before we were due to dock, the Chilean president decided that no ships would be allowed into port at all.
Wow.
Which in our case was San Antonio, about an hour from Santiago. So we sat off the coast for, I think it was 4 days, just waiting to see what negotiations, in this case, the US was doing with the Chilean government, and we decided that, or the captain decided that they had no other choice than to sail elsewhere, but the whole of South America by this time. had decided that they wouldn't accept any ships. And there were several cruise lines out there, you know, Celebrity, which we were on, Azamara, Holland America. There was a dozen cruise ships around South America. Two of them were docked beside us. So there was a lot of discussion on board. And it was, you know, it was at this point, your mental capacity starts to all sorts of things.
Must have been so worrying.
Well, it was. I was more worried that I'd missed my business class flight back from Santiago to London. I think, yeah. I mean, the crew were sensational, I have to say. But they came on and they said we're having to sail to San Diego, and in my capacity as an expert travel agent, I was thinking, well, maybe that's about 5 or 6 days. And when he said 10 days at full speed, that then brought it home that we were on this trip for a much longer than we expected. And I think whilst, again, as I say, they were very good. They opened up, you know, it was free drink, it was free Wi-Fi, so people could get home. They did all the arrangements. They contacted the airlines and so forth. So a lot of that was taken care of. So there was nothing we could do other than enjoy the hospitality on the cruise. And a lot of people back home were saying, well, it's wonderful having another 10-day cruise. Basically for nothing, wow. Really.
Well, if you have to isolate, there's no better place to isolate in a ship.
Well, that's right. And in fairness, nobody was isolating on the ship. They were partying hard on the ship. So the atmosphere was resigned to their fate, I guess, which is a lot easier done in the South Pacific on a cruise ship than it is you know, when you were in the UK at that point, because there are two things that come to mind here. One is, you're right, were we going to get home okay, in terms of where we're going to, the arrangements going to be suitable? Was America going to allow us to dock even in San Diego? Because that was in doubt up to the last minute. And also what was happening back home with our friends and immediately with our colleagues in the travel industry, because at that point I was still doing some consultancy work for Advantage, and obviously I was in close contact then, and I mean, effectively we agreed that my consultancy would stop, along with some of the other furloughed people and people being asked to work from home. So it's interesting because my career, if you like, my full-time career in the travel industry finished on a cruise ship in the middle of the South Pacific. So I suppose that's one way of doing it, I guess. Sorry, there's a phone ringing here. Okay. I apologise. So I think that's one aspect of it, but I think it was the mental issue of worrying about whether you're going to get home, and also about your friends, colleagues, family, indeed back home, because the situation was getting really bad by the time we docked in San Diego.
By now, news in Europe, I believe, in Asia and Europe were daunting indeed, and you know, a lot of people start to contract the virus. And yeah, you're right. I'm sure it must have been very worrying for your friends, your colleagues, and mostly your family back home.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I look back, because it's interesting. I tend to keep a daily diary, especially if I'm on holiday or abroad anywhere. I just note a few things down, and of course it was a bit more extensive on that cruise trip because I had more time to. So when I look back, I not every day, but almost every day, I recorded the number of casualties, and it was a bit morbid, but it allowed me to look back and see how it expanded. and how my worry levels or concern levels grew over the period of that time. And, you know, I look at, you know, other times when we've had this problem, when people have been stranded abroad, when the Icelandic volcano and you know, people, companies are collapsing or airlines are collapsing. And I experienced firsthand the concern that people have, albeit in luxury surroundings, but the concern people have in getting stranded, because although we were going to America, which is probably a lot more amenable than it might have been in, say, you know, a South American country, because it's easier to get home. I think that requirement to think about it day in, day out lessened the enjoyment of even the free drink on board the cruise ship. So
where your worries was also mostly how and when you were coming back home.
Yeah, and I think also because our family were looking at that as well, and saying, well, you know, and we were looking at them and saying, I hope they're going to be okay, because we can see this explosion, if you like, of problems. But I think you know, the relief, I suppose, in getting home was tempered by the fact we'd had, I can't deny that we had an enjoyable time on those extra days on the cruise ship. One of the curious things that happened, one of the real curious things that happened was actually people on the cruise ship were very friendly for the first 2 weeks, but for the next 10 days, they were even more friendly. It was almost like, we're in this together, and you know, we want to make sure everybody's okay, and so forth. There were a few grumpy passengers, but hey, that's, you're always going to get.
You always get this. And was anyone positive, or you think were positive?
Well, in all honesty, we still don't know the truth of it, and it could have been that some people were positive on board and they didn't tell us. I don't know, but certainly the majority of people came home. I think part of the problem was, once we arrived back into San Diego, everybody flew home. Celebrity organised a charter with Virgin for all the Brits. There's 440 British people on board. So we all came home. Yeah, that's a huge amount. We all came home together, whereas the Americans flew home individually or went by car or some other means back home to Florida, you know, Minnesota, all these places. And then when they got home, they were saying they'd contracted, a few of them saying they'd contracted, you know, the COVID. And you don't know whether they got it on the ship. They don't know whether they got it when they were transiting through the airport or on board the aircraft, which is probably more likely. But of course, some of them were accusing the cruise line of not telling them, but nobody, only the cruise line know the true story. But to be fair, I think 90% of the people on board that ship were fine. But you just don't know. And of course, if you don't have any symptoms, but you may have had it in a carrier, who knows? Just don't.
So you got back home finally, I believe at the end of March. And
yeah, I think it was the 31st of March, and arrived back home. We didn't want to travel back to Scotland by train or plane, simply because of the situation, and it was very restricted by that time. And in fact, I hired a car from Avis from Heathrow and drove home, and it was like going through an alien country, because there was no traffic on the road. Everywhere was empty. All the shops, all the service-way stations were, apart from the petrol stations, were closed. So it was a very eerie, unsettling situation, because it's not just going 20 miles down the road. This was 400 miles we travelled, and there were a few lorries on the road and one or two cars, but it was like everybody had wiped off the face of the earth, and it was really weird.
Well, it was eerie for us as well, but we kind of grew into it. It was a bit of a shock, but we kind of grew into it, and suddenly people stopped going out, and the shops and the social distancing. But what about for you? It must have been a little bit of a shock to just being thrown into it and see places that, because you didn't see the steps, you just, you know,
yeah.
in a
I guess. I mean, we were glued to the television for a good part of the, especially early evening when we were getting the update and the news on the cruise. So
it's
I
a bit
think
different, isn't it?
there is a big difference, but I think we were able to follow what was going on very closely, and maybe we watched the news even more than some people back home by that time. But it doesn't prepare you for coming home. And I guess the other thing that occurred to me, which I didn't mention, is we were okay because I had no job to go back to, and even if the job had been there, I'm sure that wouldn't have been a problem. But so many people had different issues, and this is what came home to me about other passengers who had planned things like they were running out of drugs, which, to be honest, celebrities sorted. They brought in all sorts of, because people would only take a certain amount of drugs with them for their whatever illnesses they had, and also people who had to get home for cancer operations, people who had to get home and run their business because there was nobody else there to run their business, people who had children at home and it left them with families for 2 weeks in a different city. So I think there was a lot of issues that I didn't experience that I discussed with other passengers that really brought home to me how reliant we are on other people. I guess in this case it was our cruise line, because I'd done my travel independently and celebrities sorted out a return journey. But by going abroad these days, and I'm always going to issue the value of a travel agent, but having somebody back home that you can phone who can help you with these things actually really came home to me, because it took us 36 hours to get hold of British Airways, and that was only with the help of celebrity. And that's not necessarily British Airways' fault, but it was just the situation that had arisen. And otherwise, and if we hadn't had celebrities there, we would probably still be in South America.
Wow. And you got back to Scotland, and what happened then? Just waiting for the situation to unfold?
Well, interestingly, we live in a large house which is divided into 4 different apartments. And a couple of years ago, one of the apartments became free, so we moved my mother in next door, and she's now nearly virtually 101.
Bless her! Congratulations.
And whilst we're here, we obviously take care of her on a day-to-day basis. And of course, when I was away, it was my brother who had to take care of us, who lives about 40 minutes away. And of course, when we came back, we had to isolate for another 14 days. And the only way we could actually work it was by me moving into my mother's, and Nikki, my partner, staying in our flat. And we didn't come in contact, so I could actually ensure that my mother was okay. So it impacted us in a huge way in that sense. But of course, from I was really lucky. I mean, timing is everything in life, I suppose. And who could time it any better than, stepping back from work, to semi-retire, I guess, and do that when the pandemic arose, because I had no job to go back to, and I wouldn't have had a job to go back to anyway, even if I'd carried on. So I think I was lucky, but there's so many people in the travel industry that have been devastated by that. And I think after that, and it was, to be honest, it was sometime after that, that obviously having been with the SPA in Scotland, Scottish Passenger Agents Association, and as a past president or immediate past president, I was able to offer some advice to some of the agents in Scotland on how to cope with it. But you know, that you can only do so much, and you can't finance them, and the worries and the concerns that all travel agents and travel companies, tour operators, hospitality industries, hotels have. I suppose I'm so thankful that I didn't have to experience that. Yeah. But some of the stories I've heard and gone through with people, it shocked me, quite frankly, the extent to which they were affected, not just financially, but I suppose more the mental anguish that came with this whole thing, and it's still not resolved yet.
Absolutely. So Ken, for the many colleagues, travel colleagues, or travel industry and hospitality anyway, out there that have lost their job, is any word of advice that you can give? I know it's difficult, but
yeah, I mean, look, I am fully convinced. Look, I look at myself. I am desperate to travel. I've always been a kind of gypsy in that sense. I've always wanted to roam. I've even, you know, I've had more home addresses than most people. I think I've lived in nearly 30 different addresses over my life. So I'm not afraid to roam to other places. And I love traveling. And I'm not happy unless I'm traveling. And I think there's so many other people who are like that. So there's no doubt in my mind that at some point in the future, travel will get back to, and probably be even better than it was before, because there may be more people want to realize that unless they travel now, you know, they might be restricted in the future. So I don't have any doubt that it will come back. The question is when. And I think, I see a lot of reports in the industry saying that, you know, there's lots of bookings going through. I'm sure people are making bookings, and lots of them. But the reality of life is that unless the world sorts itself out, and I'm talking about everywhere. I mean, the very place that I was in on that cruise in Brazil, it's Brazil and Argentina, wonderful, unbelievable countries, and yet they could be a real challenge to the world recovering from this situation, because they've not got the thing under control. And until Europe, I mean, you look, as of today, when we're doing this interview, Europe's surging again, and we're not going to be able to visit Italy, Germany, or France until that's been curbed, and that's going to be a struggle this year. So I think the destinations we're going to be limited to are pretty bad, and I think the one big destination that could open up is the USA, although I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't necessarily want to travel to the USA at the moment, but I'm sure that will be one that may open up this year and gives loads of opportunities to different people.
Thank you. And lastly, one curiosity. You mentioned you keep a diary. Is this diary going to be turning into a book?
Well, yeah, quite a few people know about this. I decided a long time ago that, well, I'll tell you a story, and I actually told it at an SPA dinner. My daughter, when she was, my youngest daughter, I've got 4 children. My youngest daughter, when she was, I think she was 9 or 10, was asked by the teacher, "What do your parents do for a living?" And Nicola thought for a while, and she said, "I think my dad's a spy." And the teacher said, why do you think he's a spy? He said, well, he goes abroad an awful lot and nobody knows what he does when he gets there. So I think I was quite proud of that, but I think the teacher was very disappointed when I arrived to do the parent-teacher meeting, and she wasn't confronted with a James Bond lookalike. So I think, yes, I think from the point of view of the diary was originally that I did keep a diary when I went abroad. That was the main thing. So I just to remind me what I've been able to do, and I've been able. Travel has given me so many wonderful things to be able to do. I don't want to forget any of them, and I also realised that my children probably really don't know what I have done or been or seen. And I have two sets of kids, so I've got two different families from that perspective. So, you know, a lot of them know some of it, and the others don't know anything. So I have started to write a kind of diary book, but it's for my children. Clearly, I've got to leave a lot out from the travel business because I don't want it to keep reading about, well, we went to a party here, we went to a party there. But yes, it's taken a long time to put together, and it's I'm still kind of working out the format of it. But yes, there will be at some point a book there for mainly for my children to read when I'm long gone.
I believe it's going to be a great success, and I can't wait to read it. So Ken, thank you very much for your time. It was so interesting speaking to you, and you've been, as usual, a marvelous guest and with lots of interesting things. I really love listening to you. Thank you. Thanks very much for your time, and enjoy your weekend. And good luck with the books anyway.
Thank you. Delighted, Patricia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks again.
Bye.